All right.
Hello and welcome back to the Franchise Growth Pod. My name is Belle, Director of Marketing here at AC Inc. And I am here today to kick off the new year with Angela. Angela, how's it going?
Happy New Year. Things
Happy
are
New
good.
Year.
Always a good feeling, that fresh
That's a good
start.
feeling. Oh, I love the new year. It stresses me out a little bit, not gonna lie, but but I do love it. I'm gonna I'm gonna be super honest. I kind of love September more, I think. Because
Yeah.
I feel like September feels like such a start of a new time. There are lots of times that feel like a fresh start, actually. Like now that I'm thinking about it, spring kind of feels like a fresh start. Like
All
not just the start of
seasons.
spring, but like, when it really feels like spring, like when everything starts growing again and stuff, that feels very fresh start like. Mondays feel like fresh starts.
Yeah, I think we can just be happy for fresh starts. And you know what's good is it's always nice to know that there is a fresh start. And even just this is gonna sound so cheesy, but even if the fresh start is just tomorrow,
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
when you
cheese
have
up,
those
Ange. I love it.
tough, you have that tough day and you're like, there's always tomorrow. Or you wake up the next day and you're like, you have that new fresh energy to, even though you might not be totally over the bad thing that happened, but
Mhm.
okay, like fresh new mindset.
Oh my gosh. Do you know what might be the best fresh start? The first day you wake up after being sick and you're
Oh,
not
and you
sick.
feel better.
Oh my gosh. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, all of a sudden you have so much energy and you just want to do everything and
Well,
anything. And then
because you're
you
just like,
sometimes
oh,
realize you pushed too hard though.
yeah,
Right.
true, true. But I feel like especially if you have like a sickness as in like you have like a stuffy nose or like a head cold or something, when you don't have that anymore, you're like, oh my gosh, I can breathe normally. Like it's just such a different feeling. Oh, I love that type of fresh start. That's awesome. Well, we're going to talk about fresh starts, goals, new year, same goals. I'm excited for today's episode. I love talking about goal setting with you, Ange. But we are going to kick off this fresh new year of Franchise Growth Podcast with an icebreaker, of course. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm never ready
Really?
for this. For this. I'm ready for other things.
I feel like it's so funny how people get so nervous about my icebreaker questions.
You know
And
what
I
we should
feel like
do?
I fine tuned them where they're pretty easy to answer now. Like they
We
used to be,
should
I
we should
definitely had a few that were tricky, but now I
okay.
feel like they're getting good.
Because we could like flip it around and we get on the podcast and the guest, which is a team member, asks you the icebreaker question.
Totally. I'd be
That's
super.
what we should do.
I love answering icebreakers.
Well, do you want me to ask you one then, or do you want to ask me the one that you have planned that I don't know what it is?
Why don't I ask you and then you ask me one? But are you
Okay.
gonna ask me a different one? Because usually I
Yeah,
just answer the same icebreaker. Okay, you're gonna
I'm
ask
gonna
me
ask
something
you
different.
something.
Okay. My question for you is what are you reading right now?
Ooh, so I am reading The Speed of Trust. It's such a great book. It is one that we all in franchising need to read. There's so
Mhm.
many great tips and nuggets and things to get out of it. And there's a lot of books I will say too in franchising, or not just in franchising, but in business. It's interesting how you can go back and read a book again and get more out of it. So if anybody's listening, they're like, "Yeah, I've read that. Maybe it's time to go read it again," because you never
Yeah.
know.
I actually really agree
Brain.
with that. And I also think that it's interesting how some business books like really resonate with some people and then another person can read it and like not get the same thing out of it at all. Like I think business books are really interesting like that. I definitely go through phases of business books like where I'll be like read a bunch and then I'm like obsessed with them and then I will be really disinterested for a while and like not really read a lot of them. So it's definitely it comes in waves, but I agree. Like when you go back and read something, I do that with like some copywriting books or some marketing books. And it is cool. I like to think of it as when I need to get like re-inspired in
Mm.
my work or in, yeah, for you, it would be like in leadership or whatever, to get re-inspired to go back to something that even if you've already done it, to like go, oh, but I got so inspired doing this the first time, whether it's reading or listening to the book or whatever, to do it again almost like helps you get back into that inspired headspace. At least for me. So I completely agree on the going back to things that you have already learned about or gone through before.
Awesome.
Okay, are you gonna ask me mine?
Oh, yeah. Are you excited or nervous?
I'm excited. I'm
Okay.
interested because I like to prep my questions. Like I don't love coming up with stuff like really quickly. And so
Hmm.
you are just gonna come up with it. So I'm interested.
Okay. If you were on a desert island, what food would you eat? One thing only.
One thing, like pretty much like one thing for the rest of my life.
Ever. Yeah.
I have a lot of good answers. Okay, I'll answer something that's timely,
Okay.
which is I am a huge pie fan. And specifically, I love chicken pot pie. I love it. I also think it's like protein, but also lots of fat. So like it would be good for me on a desert island, you know, because I would have lots to do. I'd be like building shelter, trying to build a raft. Like I'd really need a lot of energy, need to build up like fat, you know, like I really would need, like I really think that would be a great thing. And also the reason why it's timely is because it's my favorite like winter meal, because I don't eat it during the summer or spring. Like it's just, I just eat it in the winter. And
Mhm.
I just have been starting to make them myself. Like I'll make a homemade
I have seen
pie.
this on Instagram. It's
Yes.
pretty cool.
I want to, I'm trying not to, I have made 2 in 2 weeks. So that has been a
Okay.
lot, but I haven't got tired of it yet. And I think if I continued making it, like I could get better at making it. So I'm thinking that if I make it a few more times, like maybe a couple times a month, I'll get really good at making them by the end of the winter time.
And then you'll stop making them for the summer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'll be my plan. I like having seasonal things. Like I like when it's like you eat something like a lot. Like I eat a lot of soup in the winter. Don't really have a ton of soup in the summer. A lot of
Okay.
salads. Okay, that was a great question. Love it. I love food and book related questions. Those are like my favorite ones.
Perfect.
So that worked out great. So we are going to dive into talking about goal setting. We're going to be talking about the new year. We already kind of had a bit of a rant on fresh starts, but I want to get into first of all, just to clarify, we always do an episode about goals and fresh starts and getting ready for the new year for the first week of January. That's kind of been our tradition for the past couple of years on the podcast. And I want to talk to you, Angela, about your perspective. I was going to say thoughts, but like it's really your like insights on goal setting, because so you've been a leader in a lot of different spaces. You've been a business professional in a lot of different spaces. You've been a franchisee, a field coach on a corporate side of a franchise system. You're a mom, you're a leader to our company. Like you're a leader in your community, you're a speaker. Like there's so many elements that you could have goals around, right? Health, business, leadership, speaking, reading, whatever. Like there's so many things. And I feel like that must either be overwhelming or you must love it, or like I know that we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but what are your thoughts around setting goals at any time of year, but specifically around like the start of a new year or the start of a new time? What's your perspective on it in general? Do you like it, not like it, feel differently depending on what it is? What are your thoughts?
I think it's really important for us to take time to reevaluate what we're trying to do in life, I guess. Um for me, business is a big part of my life, and I
Yeah.
think for everybody work generally is, but that may not be where your goals lie. But for me, my goals are definitely really I mean, of course I have health goals and relationship goals and things like that, but um one of the big goal that I have to make sure I stay clear on is where I want AC Inc. to go and what I want to be doing in my business. And so I think it's always good to have a time where that forces you to stop and reevaluate your goals. And so what I like to do is start with, and this is new as of a few years ago, as we've talked about this on previous podcasts, but this wasn't how I was always.
Mhm.
I used to get very overwhelmed by the idea of like, oh, now I have to set goals, and what if I don't meet them, and a lot of anxiety about that. But in my mind, I like to start with, I guess it's traction style, really. It's not like I'm making this up, really. It's been made up, but getting really clear on that vision, what makes me really excited, where I could potentially end up. Like, what do I want to be doing? What does it look like? How much am I working? Things like that. And so I like to like actually visualize that. And then after I've, spent some time just visualizing and thinking it through, and closing my eyes and going, does this actually make me excited? Like, does this, get that feeling? I'm pointing my chest right now for anybody that's listening and not watching, like that feeling of, yeah, this is it. Right. So I want to make sure I'm always connected to that. And, BHAG is another way to put it, of course, big, hairy, audacious goal. And I'm just trying to find the emotion in it. So there's that. And then I like to, work backwards and think about some things that need to happen. And for me, with the business itself, we follow Traction EOS, and we have very clear annual goals and like quarterly rocks, and then how we achieve those. So that's all happening in the business. But for me as a person, it's a little bit more relaxed. I have this vision, and then I like to journalize. I like to journalize at the end of a year, a lot of great things that happen, just so I take that time to reflect, but then also journalize the things as if they already happened, as if it's like the end of, say, 2024, and I'm journalizing like, and we brought on 2 new team members or whatever the thing is, and we launched this program or courses that we have been working towards, and as if it happened. And so that I've just got a really clear picture of what we're trying to get towards. So I'm going to segue from, that's sort of my visualization that I do. But then when it comes to like, I don't know where the in-between is for this, but my granular way of achieving, I guess my granular way of being effective at what I do, and I guess to somewhat of a, higher performer, requires me, and anyone that, does this, I think you just get better results, is what are some smaller, consistent action steps I can take on a daily basis to make sure that I stay grounded, that I take the right actions, that I make the right decisions towards these goals. So I know where I'm trying to go, and I'm going to act in a certain way. And so examples of that is, my morning routine hasn't really changed. So I still do my gratitude journal in the morning. That's super important to me. My exercise, my nutrition in the mornings, and of course, hopefully throughout the day, but I always like to start off right, start with that win. And then it's like, what professional development am I doing? Like, am I doing, what am I reading this year? Like, not just this year, but what is my cadence going to be like? Am I everyday reading? What am I doing? So that's the more granular of how I set goals. And I know that was a very long-winded answer.
No, I have taken already. I'm sure you can hear me clicking away. I'm sorry for audio listeners, but I already grabbed a couple notes. This is so valuable. I definitely am hearing. So I love the visualization. I also love the finding. I think the biggest, honestly, key takeaway is the finding emotion in the goal. Like, it's not just that. And it's so funny that you're talking about this, but I was just having this conversation with my husband about, having like monetary goals. A lot of people I've been talking to, a lot of my peers and stuff, have these, like, this is the type of raise I want to get this year at work, or this is how much I want to make on my freelance work, or this is, how much we want to save for whatever goal it is, right? And franchisees, I think, often have that as well. If they're talking to field coaches, they'll go, this is like the number that I want to hit this year. And I was saying to Josh, I said, that to me, when I was younger, which I know is so silly to say, I'm like 26, but like when I was younger, those types of goals would really resonate. And I would go, oh my gosh, yeah, I want to hit this number. I want to hit this saving or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That would be so motivating to me. And I'd get all fired up. And now I'm just like, I don't really care. Like,
It's hooking you.
Because it's not connecting to what I actually want,
right?
Which is, I want to be secure in my income. I want to, make enough that we could take trips that we want to take. Like, it connects back to so much more than just this number. So for me to be hearing like peers and friends and stuff talking about like, oh yeah, this is my big number goal. I'm like, that's super cool. Like, what are you going to do with it? Like, what's the purpose of that? Like, that's where so much of my excitement now comes from. Like, oh, could I work, less, or could I,
and what would that look like? Right.
Totally. Or like, could we take a big trip and like use my husband's vacation really strategically to like do this really cool trip, or get to go see, our cousin get married or whatever it is. Like, it's really cool to have, that type of emotion and that type of why behind a lot of these bigger like number or financial, or even just like, not even that, but like a health goal, like to say, I want to lose this much weight or whatever it is, or I want to eat this much type of diet in the morning. It's like, why, right? What? And this is something we talk so much about in field coaching, is connecting back to the why. And we talk about it kind of so much, we don't need to dive too far into it, but it really resonates for yourself as well. It's not just about how to coach franchisees. It's like, how are we talking to ourselves about our goals, and why do these things matter to us? Why does being this type of healthy, why does running, a half marathon matter to me? right? Like, why is it a
Yeah.
sense of accomplishment? I want to accomplish something this year. I want to accomplish something big that I never thought I could do. That's a huge one. That's a great reason. Do I want to, be able to play with my grandkids? Like, I have some of my grandkids are like, a big health goal is like that they stay really mobile, right? So that's why they're focusing on their health. So I think it's really cool to think of that emotional connection and visualizing that at the beginning of the year. And then, and this is what I want to talk to you about, is the habits that build it, as opposed to saying, well, I have to do this by Q1. And I have to do, instead thinking about what are the more daily or weekly or monthly things, these regular things that are going to build that. It doesn't, and yeah, of course, like project management of like, if I want to run a half marathon by June, I need to do this type of running. That's great. Like that definitely still has its place of like mapping it out. But the habitual, the regular things are what you and I have had such great conversations about, is like, that is such a difference maker about, because yeah, anyone can go, well, I want to run this, and then just map it. Okay, I need to run this many kilometers this week and this many, like there's, preset plans for all of that. Right. But what are you doing kind of daily that's going to be supporting that is so interesting.
Yeah. You know what? I have to, I have to tell a quick story.
Go for it.
Is that okay? I just think it's so, when I get the opportunity to speak at franchise company conferences, I think it is so important that we are so motivated by this visualization, or this vision for ourselves that we just talked about. And so when I recently had the opportunity, even at the FBR summit in the fall, to speak to that audience, it's like, no one's motivated unless they are connected to that thing. And so I wanted to just tell quickly this story of my favorite BHAG, or my favorite one that really helps people understand the importance of the emotion in it. So I was going to tell about my buddy Chris, who I know I get permission to tell this story. And I was working with him, and I was like, I need to know what your BHAG is so I can help you stay motivated when the going gets tough, and that you take those action steps that you need to be taken. And he's like, oh, I'd like to, own another property. Like, he had a young family. And I'm like, no, there's got to be something more exciting than that, like something more emotional than that, or tell me more about this property. And he's like, humming and hawing. And eventually goes, you know what? I've always, it's like he had to dig deeper. And he's like, I would love to be able to take my entire family, like he's one of like 9 siblings or something, and their kids to Disney World. And I was like, ooh, that sounds really good, Chris. Now you're starting to, get into like something a little bit more emotional. You're thinking of your family. And he's like, yeah, and I want to do it. So again, like his whole family and their kids, in honor of my father who passed away. And it was always his dream to he loved Disney, and it was his dream to take us to Disney World. And I want to do that for my dad in his honor.
That's such a great example. Yeah. Because for someone to say something, yeah, like I want to have another property, I want to, retire at this age or whatever. But where is like that emotional, like gut feeling connection of like, I want this so much on a deeper level, is so cool. And I have heard that story before, to be fair, but because I obviously have heard you speak many times, but that one always really resonates. And
I just wanted to throw that in because it helps people understand what we mean about emotion. Like, go deeper, like what is the thing? So, but I know you asked about like habits and more granular. Was that what you were asking? Like,
well, yeah. And what I wanted to kind of get into is, you've mentioned before, like, instead of thinking about January as this time to like set really big, crazy goals, which, as you said, that's more of a vision piece. Like, that's really more of like thinking about what's your vision. And that might even stretch beyond the year, right? So to think that January, we need to come up with what's the next 12 months is I think going a little bit more out the window. But sometimes you still hear people talk about, yeah, those like 12-month goals or whatever. But you have talked about the vision, which could expand over a decade. It could be a big vision, right? But you talk a lot about then the renewing of those habits, because you have things and this is actually why we named the episode New Year, Same Goals, is because you have been doing some of the same habits since I've known you, which is actually quite a long time at this point. It's kind of crazy. But for over the past years, you have had a lot of these same habits that and you mentioned a couple of them, the health in the morning, the diet in the morning, the exercise, the journaling, and like you have these things and they're not anything crazy. And I remember you even told me, might expose you a bit, but the 1 page of reading per day,
Yes.
that's Angela's goal.
I still do it.
1 page.
Yeah, it works.
It's so funny to me. I love it. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, I know
But
it is kind of embarrassing, but at the same time, it works. It works, man. And I usually
totally.
between one more or like more than one, but if it doesn't, then at least I did it.
Totally. No, and that's why I think it's hilarious, because it truly embodies what you coach people on and what you as a leader stand for, which is it just has to be doable. It just has to be consistently doable. That's all it has to be. It doesn't have to be crazy. But as you said, most days you're not going to actually just read the 1 page. You'll flip and maybe read the next page, or maybe you'll get maybe 3 or 4 pages. Some days I'm sure you read tons because you're sitting on the weekend or whatever, but to have it be this consistent habit is such an embodiment of what you talk about. But I wanted to ask you about January is still this fresh start, and a lot of people do feel like, oh, I kind of want to work on some things or get some stuff in place that maybe even just through December might have been thrown off a bit. And I'm sure you feel this a little bit as well. December can get a bit crazy. So even if just habits have been kind of thrown off, how would you recommend thinking about like renewing habits, like getting back into habits, as opposed to starting brand new goal or like these huge things? That's obviously great. And we talked about that vision side, which is awesome, but renewing the small things we do every day. What are some things that you do kind of heading into this time of year after, what can sometimes be a very differently paced month, that really helps you kind of get back into the routine?
Well, definitely, I know I already said, but that vision piece is really important because it's the motivator, right? So starting with that, but then once that's been done, I guess it's not new really, like you said, but it's the doing something that I'll actually do. So if say I fell off my routine completely, I'm not going to go and like do all the things on the first day. Maybe just say you used to, you might, like for me, it's like gratitude journal and the reading the 1 page and working out. Maybe I go, I'll just do the gratitude journal today. Just get back into that first. So baby steps, like start with that and then add on to it as you go. Like, it's kind of sort of an analogy or similar thing as when I first started running back in, I don't know, 2000 or late 90s or something. I would go, okay, I'm just going to go for 5 minutes. Or I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk. And then within that, I'll run for a minute on, minute off or something, right? And it always just ended up, once you start, you end up doing more. So I think just starting that routine back up, it won't take you long before you're like, I want more. But I would caution people, like there's a limit. Like I'm probably at the limit for my routine. Otherwise I'd start to like, I don't know, it just gets a little out of control and expectations. Like I can't, you can't do everything. Like I love Wim Hof breathing. I love just meditation, but I got to pick my things, and so pick the things that you're actually, like I said, going to do, but don't judge yourself or compare yourself to what other people do. And
that is so real. I'm so glad you touched on that. I think that's a big part of this time of year, or any time where people are kind of working on goals, is I love I see so many morning routines from like, that would take me 3 hours. Like, I don't have 3 hours to build this beautiful, like, I don't have that.
I mean, maybe if you just like, you're retired and you really like, you've just done really well in life and
totally. That would be great.
Let's get real.
Yeah. but I really like that take on it, is that if we're talking about renewing habits, first of all, great tip on the, like, let's just start with like 1 or 2 things, like, especially if you've really dropped off of quite a lot of your kind of daily things that you like doing, getting back onto 1 or 2 of them at a time, not kind of hopping directly back into a full routine, I think is great. But then also being realistic about how many things you can do daily. And I think that goes back to it being doable, right? So if you're saying, well, reading 1 page daily, writing in my gratitude journal in the morning, going on some form of like a walk or movement for 30 minutes a day. Okay, so that's like 3 or 4 things. Going in the ocean weekly. I know that you do that through the whole year, which is crazy. But for all of those things, imagine if now you were like, and also I'm going to swim half an hour every day, like as well as everything I'm doing. I would also do that. It's like, okay. And they're like, oh, and
now I don't want to do any of it.
Totally. And it's like, and also you have to make dinner every night. That's going to be a routine. It's like, okay, now it's starting to become like a lot of things that are, it's gonna have like, your motivation just drops for all of it, as opposed
it's going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
if it
Totally.
doesn't
I
have to
think
be
that's
too.
so true. That's a good
Well,
one.
and
I
even,
definitely need that reminder.
and even with the gratitude journal, like people often are like, I just can't get in the habit. I'm like, what if you just wrote down one thing?
Mhm.
Like mine has, it prompts me to two things I'm grateful for, one person I'm grateful for, what would make the day great, and then an affirmation. But what if I just was thankful for one thing?
I also think for that type of thing too, and this is where a lot of people go, it like is super tricky. For me, what's made it really helpful, and you've actually talked about this as well a bunch, is like make it easy then. Like you have said you have an
Yeah.
app that you'll use for the gratitude side. So it'll prompt you, right? So it'll send you reminders like, hey, you haven't done it yet. And so that's just like sitting in your face, like, hey, here's how you do
Mm.
click here and you can fill it in. Or, I know some people have notebooks beside their laptop. So through the week, like Monday to Friday, at the top of your notebook, write down one thing that's making you happy. Like that's a great one, right? Because it's just right there, as opposed to feeling like you need to build this entire new,
You
make it part of your regular routine.
could literally just have scrap papers in front
Mm.
of you, like I do now, for just in case I need to jot something down. And you could write the thing down on that, and it would probably have the same effect. Like I could write down right now, I'm grateful for the good lunch I had, or something like that.
Mm.
And it would still just remind me of something I'm grateful for. And whether I keep that or throw that in recycling later, it doesn't matter. I did it, it
Totally.
like just in the act of writing it. And, or if somebody's saying, well, I don't like, I was traveling, so I dropped off from doing my gratitude journal because I didn't bring it with me. Like, again, just grab in the hotel room, the paper. Like, it doesn't need to be perfect,
Yeah.
it's
I think
do it.
being honest with what you can do and then setting yourself up for success in that. Like I've also heard, some people go a little bit too far in the other direction where they're, I want to read one business book this year. It's like,
Mm,
that's really tough because that's first of all not a regular activity that you're setting
right.
yourself up for. That's something where you could push it until the very end of the year and then you still have not like learned anything new. Or you
Mm.
could look at that and go, perfect, I'm going to listen to a 1 minute. It could be as a one, I mean, that would be crazy, but 1 minute of an audio business book every
Yeah.
day, right? And you know how many you'd probably get through in the year? Like, well, I don't know, actually.
We've
One.
got 5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes equals one page.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like setting yourself up so it's easy. Like, oh, I already go for a walk every morning and I want to read more this year. Well, why don't you just listen to more audiobooks? Like there's a free library app. Set yourself up on that. So that way you don't even need to buy them. Like I think making it easier for yourself and then not setting goals that are like huge with no actual steps that are regular. I think that's a really big one on the
And
like
just knowing yourself too. Like I think, different people are motivated by different types of goals. Some people are really motivated by just numbers and money on its own without thinking about
And
the
that's
big.
and that's what I was saying too at the beginning.
That's
I was
okay.
saying, like, when I was younger, that would totally have fired me up of like, I'm gonna hit this. And like, but I think the why was that I wanted to know that I could do that, that I was,
Yeah,
I
that's
could
great.
figure out a way to do that. But I didn't go back to that why. I was just motivated by whatever number I was putting on my spreadsheet for the beginning of the
Yeah.
year. Right? Like that was enough for me at a certain point, and maybe at another point it will be as well. Like who knows? But
Well, I think you're right. It's the accomplishment. The feeling of
yeah.
accomplishment was enough at the
But
time.
it's funny that like I didn't even really connect those dots. I was like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
just so motivated. But I didn't think about like, well, why is that so exciting to me? Like, why is that motivating me? And like maybe I could get to a deeper reason on that and it would provide even more motivation or even more of a thing to turn to if things got tough. Right. Like, but yeah, at different points in my life, I was definitely just like, woo, number, go for it.
You're
um,
so much more grown up now, Mrs. Bell.
I was gonna say, I know so much has changed.
Married and all.
Just a married woman who like
Yeah.
really cares about her why.
Yeah.
Angela, I really enjoyed this chat. This has been so valuable. Last question, and you can add anything you want to this as well, but last question would be if I'm a leader listening to this, so if I lead, and a leader in any shape of the word, if I'm a leader in my family, if I'm a leader in my community, a leader in my business, in any way, shape of that word, and you're thinking about the people around you and how you could support them to build habits and help them achieve the things they want to achieve, what is, and it doesn't have to cover everything, but what is something you'd give as advice? Like if you're a leader and is it leading by example? Is it like sitting down with people and helping them, or is it just empowering them to take the time to build routines? Like what is something as a leader I could do to help people around me accomplish their goals this year?
Yeah. I love, leading by example is such a great point because, it shows that it's doable.
Mhm.
I think just taking the time to, um, to remind people the importance of their goals. Like I mentioned earlier, when I've had the opportunity, whenever I'm speaking at a franchise company conference and helping franchisees think about this, or professionals in any way that I get, to speak in front of, reminding them, they're like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that in a while. So I think our job is just to remind people to slow down and take that time to make sure that we're working towards the thing that does motivate us and get us excited, and that we know what that is. It's night and day. Like when I didn't know what it was, I don't know where the heck I was going. But once I knew where I wanted to end up, and it's changed over, over time, it changes, and that's okay. But you act a certain way to get towards that thing. So I think it's important to make sure that the people around you know what that is. That would be the biggest thing. And of course, everything we said on this podcast, I would say to like about the smaller, actionable, achievable, all that stuff is what I would say to. I would sit down and have those conversations with people around me that were under my care.
Amazing. Amazing. What I'm hearing is send this podcast.
Just like,
people in your life. That's what I'm hearing. Is the takeaway. Angela, as always, I appreciate your time so much. You are such a busy and impressive lady. So it's always amazing to have you on the podcast. Sharing your insights and your action steps is awesome. And to everyone listening, welcome to the new year. Welcome back to the Franchise Growth Pod after our little break. And hope everyone has a wonderful start to January, and go be awesome.
Go be awesome.